skill set that makes them excellent child care workers, then that may liberate mothers who have a skill set that make them very well-paid attorneys to spend more time at the office. That's a mechanism in which you have complementary labor, right? You have different kinds of labor. But it's because the price of childcare has fallen that we get more attorney moms out there increasing the GDP in some way or another. Does that make a certain amount of sense? There has to be some kind of change. And if you've got change, though, you're going to have redistributional consequences. Okay. All right. So by that logic, we are lucky to see that wages have kind of fallen or at least stagnated since 1965. In real terms, they've fallen, but they've somewhat regained they've somewhat regained a part of their past levels. But you can see it's almost uncanny. It's really, 1965 wages are going up, but then as the Hart-Celler Act takes effect, in 1972 things start to come down. It's almost, if we were to superimpose immigration numbers over, it would just be the opposite. Except that after 1996, immigration numbers keep going up, and the wage rate also does. Wage rate starts to recover a little bit. So it's not a perfect fit, but there's enough there that you might want to puzzle over it. It's not the same pattern we saw previously, right? With wage rates up to 1930 at least, we saw a pretty consistent rise. Okay? So this is also an era of massive immigration, as we well know, and wage rates are not falling here. So this is not something that simply always happens when there's immigration, but it's something that does seem to bear some explanation, or does make us want to try to explain it. So one possibility, which turns out to not work, is that immigrants simply lower wages by coming here, right? By coming to the United States and earning low wages. So if enough immigrants came, they all earned lower wages. That would lower the average wage. The fact is that there just aren't enough. That is not the case. And from the lower picture, we can see that immigrants are not even numerically significant, even though immigrants do account for large proportions of the population of the workforce who are high school dropouts. Something like 75% of high school dropouts, I shouldn't say dropouts, but 75% of workers in the U.S. who do not have a high school education are foreign-born. Right, so they're very much overrepresented there. And those with high school or less, it's about 35%. I'm sorry, with those with high school or less, 35%. Whereas we said immigrants are about 13% of the population. So they're overrepresented in the low-skill areas where the wages are low. But at the same time, they aren't enough because over time, the proportion of people with less than high school education has just consistently fallen. Right? Proportion of the population with high school or more has risen, and the population with four or more years of college has risen gently first and then steeply for a while. After about 1972, there's something that's interesting, not crucial to our story here, but interesting to note, and that is that the upward slope of this line after the mid-1970s is all accounted for by people with more than 4 years of college. The proportion of the population with 4 years of college has not risen since the 70s, which is something that has potentially devastating consequences. And the upper graph, you can see that this education matters. I mean, it definitely does matter. If you look at that, not a terribly useful graph, but it shows two things. It shows that you look at the first set, the higher set of bars, that's less than high school, and just look at men for now, which is dark blue versus light blue. You can see that the wage rate of men who have less than high school education has dropped considerably between 1979 and 2002. So if you have less than high school education, you're going to do a lot worse today than your dad, who also doesn't have a high school education. Right? Conversely, if you're a college graduate, you're going to do a lot better. Right? Not just better than the high school, not just better than the guy who dropped out of high school, but better than the guy who went to college in 1979. Right? So wages have increased for the college graduates, and they have fallen for people with less education. What that means is that the gap between the rewards for going to college have risen even more, right? Because you're looking at the difference now between the two dark blue lines versus the two light blue lines. So in 1979, a high school dropout was earning about 600, or less than 600, whereas the college graduate was somewhere around 900, a $300 difference. But now high school dropouts' wages have fallen to more like 400, and the college graduates have risen to something like 1,100. So that's almost a factor of 2. There's some economists who find evidence of this kind of effect. This direction of effect from immigrants. That is, that immigrants swelling the ranks of the less educated might be lowering the wages of the less educated. Borjas, in particular, finds that, but he never finds anything that large. It's never enough to find it, and some economists find much less. In fact, let's turn to that. So what George Borjas does, he takes the 1960 takes censuses between 1960 and 1990, I believe 30 years, and he chops them into cells like this of years of experience and education. Right? So what I mean by chopping them into cells is think of a cross tabulation, and you look at the average wage rate of people with 10 years of experience and a high school degree, and you calculate that for 1960, for 1970, for 1980, for 1990. You look at those wage rates and you adjust them for inflation. And then you do the same for people with 10 years of experience and a college degree over time. And what he finds is that those categories that have lost the most are the ones where a lot of immigrants have shown up. So in some cases, in the highest case, the worst case was wages for high school dropouts with 11 to 15 years of experience. They found that over that time period, in real terms, the wages of that group dropped 12.7%. But that's not a huge group because he broke this into a lot of different cells, and no other cell has this kind of a drop. For college graduates with 11 to 15 years of experience, this drop was interestingly 3.6%. He found a decrease for everybody in terms of wages. So with that, Borjas concluded not only that immigrants caused significant drops in wages of people with less education, but also that there were interesting race effects. Because minorities tended to be in the categories where the wages fell most, there was a particularly high impact of immigration on the wages of minorities. When you read Suro, there are hints that some of that may be going on, at least in terms of perception. Right? David Card, on the other hand, criticized this study for saying, a lot of other things were going on in this period. You can't really just look at these wage cells, we know that wages were falling. It's not enough to say just because there were a lot of immigrants in the groups where wages fell, that must be the explanation. There were other explanations too, and we'll talk about them in a minute, and they're compelling. So what Card did instead was to look at intercity wage comparisons. That is, he looked at cities that had a lot of immigrants and cities that didn't have a lot of immigrants, and compared the wages of different skill and education and experience levels. And he found nothing. He also, in a separate study, looked at the Mariel boat lift we talked about. Mariel boat lift, the 125,000 people who descended on Miami, the majority of them had very low skills and didn't even speak English particularly well. Remember, some of them were recently released from Cuban mental health facilities. Nonetheless, it didn't change the wages. There were very limited and non-significant effects on anybody's wages in Miami from this effect. I mean, the high school dropouts might have suffered a little bit, but I don't believe it was even statistically significant. And Carr explains that with, well, capital responds. Right? It's a big country, and if a city suddenly gets an influx of a different kind of labor, well, capital may adjust, and those people may be employed by new enterprises that move to Miami to take advantage of that labor. Borjas replies that, well, people are mobile too, and you can't look at cities because people will move around to equalize wages. Yes, Kevin?
Does the study include the agricultural sector, which depends on immigrants?
No, I believe it is only in the Miami area that Card studied it. He did not include agricultural areas. But I don't think the Mariel boat lift immigrants went to rural areas for the most part. What's that? Yeah, I don't believe they did. So I think in his case that's true. But again, I think you raise an interesting question. What about the agricultural sector? And Borjas would probably argue that it would matter that sector might be particularly significant to immigrants. But and nonetheless, I think there is a spitting match going on between these two famous economists, and there's no answer. But I think the fact that there isn't a real smoking gun, and yet we do have the kind of wage stagnation that is breathtaking. It's hard to see. If Borjas can't convince Card, he can't convince me either. It's just immigration just cannot account for all of that. Inequality is another big change. I think I showed a graph similar to this one earlier when we were talking about 1913. But I want to show it again to remind you what has happened here. Again, since 1963, what we see is a rising proportion of all income accruing to those who earn the top 1%. And that's about $382,000 in 2006 dollars. So that's fairly high earning income. And if you look at this in 1968 or so, that group, the top 1%, was earning about 9% of total income. That's more than just wage income, right? So that's income from all sources. And by 2003, that's well above 20%. That is a stunning change. That's a big change in how the country looks. And it's a change that brings us back to the Gilded Age, back to the 1920s. That was the last time we saw this kind of inequality, and that didn't end very well. But that was also a period of high immigration. Right? So again, one can raise the question: well, is immigration part of the cause? And the answer is probably no. For similar reasons, there just aren't enough. There aren't enough immigrants to make this work. Let me see if we got. No, don't have a. Whoops. Sorry, I've lost a slide. Let's see. Oh well, you see here. Explanations that work, I think, perhaps better than immigration, at least acceptable by many economists, are skill-based technological change, which means technology simply changes. We've got a lot more sophisticated machinery, and to operate sophisticated machinery, you need education, so the returns to education are higher. In a nutshell, that's a pretty easy story to believe. That may explain part of it. Globalization is another story that muddies the water a lot in this case. Whether or not we have immigrants coming to the United States, the United States is trading with the rest of the world in a much more open way. There are many fewer barriers to trade than there used to be. So as the rest of the world develops, U.S. workers are competing with workers in the rest of the world, whether or not they live in Los Angeles. That's going to drive down wages too. When cars are built in Korea and soon in China, where wages are lower, it's going to be hard for Detroit to pay the kind of wages that it paid in the 1960s when cars were not made there. The superstar economy is another interesting story. Also has to do with technological change. Think about music industry, for example. I think you have to go back before the 1960s to a time when there would have been a lot more work for local musicians, right? But with radio and recordings, everybody wants to listen only to the superstars. It's much more general than just music industry. It's also true in academia, for example, where universities compete with really famous economists mostly. But the one that I think is actually most interesting is this one that I'm calling Decline of Civilization. I think that's a good way to end the lecture. What I mean by the decline of civilization is culture. And this is an idea that Paul Krugman is pushing. And I think it's an interesting thing to speculate about. If you look at CEO compensation, Fortune 100 CEOs' wages rose 2,800% between 1970 and 1999, while the average worker's wage rose 10%. It is very difficult to believe that CEOs became 2,800% more productive. What Krugman would argue, and what I think John Kenneth Galbraith would perhaps argue if he were still alive, is that what changes the culture. Galbraith pointed out in the 1960s, he asked the question, why don't CEOs loot companies and pay themselves more? And his conclusion was that they didn't. They restrained their wages because it just didn't look right. For one thing, it didn't look right to unions, which were much more important at the time. Union membership declined quite considerably. If the CEO paid himself 3,000 times what the average worker would get, the average worker would go on strike. The average worker doesn't have that power now, so the CEOs get away with it. But there's a cultural change here too. There is some sense in which greed is good that may not have existed before. And that attitude is reflected in income tax rates. Income tax rates have have declined from something like 71.7% for the wealthiest to 35% in 2003. Now, this effect, the effective tax, is not enough to get that. In fact, those distribution numbers that I showed before are pre-tax. So this is not the effective. This is simply a reflection of it. This is a cultural change. The idea that it's somehow wrong to tax the wealthy at this high rate. This simply corresponds to the idea that a CEO of a major corporation would not feel right back in 1970 in paying himself, in engineering a pay rate that high. And finally, there is an Anglo-Saxon difference, which also points in the direction of culture, and that's that those graphs, this graph that we showed, you can draw a similar graph for Canada that shows this massive increase in wealth, in income accruing to the wealthiest. You can show that in Australia. You cannot show it in France. You can't show it in Germany. It's really only Anglo-Saxon countries that seem to have undergone that change over that period. So I guess you could argue that Australia and Canada are also immigrant-receiving countries, but so is Germany now. The fraction of immigrants in Europe is also on par with what it is in the U.S. now. So I think taken together, this is provocative. It doesn't prove anything, but I think it casts a lot of cold water on the idea that the presence of immigrants are responsible for either the stagnation of wages or for inequality. All right. So in summary, the conclusions to draw from the neoclassical economics model may not be all that distinguishable from their assumptions. The economic impacts, nonetheless, are probably not big enough to dominate policy considerations. Differences, however, to the extent that benefits derive, they have to derive from differences. All right. Any questions? All right. There are no questions. We'll be out in the hall distributing past tests and labs.